Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is the Thursday, June 14, 2018 Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District Board meeting. We'll start with the pledge of the flag, if we could. Director Wood.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you, everybody. It is Flag Day today, so I appreciate you all participating in that. This open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14, replay on Monday, June 18, 2018 at 6 p.m. and Wednesday, June 20th, 2018 at 12 noon on Channel 14, or webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The open session meetings are also available for viewing on the district's website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. Now is the opportunity for the public to discuss matters of public interest within the district or jurisdiction, including items or not on the agenda. Sorry, I'll get it together. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers?
There are no speakers this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll be moving on to the consent items. Do we have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I'd move the consent.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Director Gale.
I wasn't here for the special board meeting, I don't think. So I couldn't vote on that. But the rest of it, no problem.
Then I'll mark you as an abstention since you weren't able to vote for that one. And Director Jones.
Aye.
Director Sheets.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all the work in putting into those consent items. Moving on to the action items, disclosure of material expenditure commercial insurance. Mr. Sveningsson. Did I get it right? You can correct me. Come on up, please. Feel free to correct me, please.
Brad Sveningsson, USI Insurance. So we had several policies that renewed and two that we're going to talk about, I guess, tonight. The first being the policy with SDRMA. That includes your property and your autos, management liability, those types of things. We had a increase this year. Part of it had to do with you had 25 additional vehicles that you added to your fleet. That was about 5%, and 15% was rate increases, mainly due to loss ratio. Loss ratio meaning premiums paid versus losses that you have had. In the last 5 years, you're trending around 76%. Which means for every $100 you're giving the insurance company, $76 is going towards claims. And that's break even is probably about 65%. So they're kind of hitting you a little bit on the premium side to hopefully that will drive that ratio down and make it more appealing. So I guess I don't know how much you want me to talk about, but it seems like the biggest culprits in it would be those rear-end accidents where not emergency, but they're still happening. Other than that, insurance is there for insurance.
Well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What's the difference in an insurance company and a Ponzi scheme? What's the difference?
Well, I guess the insurance company truly has the backing, financial backing, to pay claims. They buy reinsurance in case they don't have the money. They have an insurance policy to cover claims. I don't know much about Ponzi schemes other than the fact that, there's really not that nest egg of money to pay.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you for your explanation.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the group, I move the approval, staff's recommendation, and approve the policy for our commercial
Thank you very much.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, and you're up again.
Yeah, the second policy is your excess workers' comp policy. Workers' comp rates have been pretty flat, pretty stable in the last couple of years, which has been good. Insurance companies took a big hit last year on, hurricanes and fires, and that's kind of trending over to the companies that actually do workers' comp, but they also do the fire and windstorm and hurricane coverage. But all that being said, we were able to negotiate a flat renewal on rate for the workers' comp. Safety National continues to be not only the most competitive, but the broadest coverage out there in the marketplace right now. So Safety National is what was presented.
Chair, I'd make a recommendation that we accept the recommendation of.
I have a question.
Let me add.
I'll second that to get the motion moving.
We'll get the motion moved, but I will allow the question. Go ahead, Director
Yes,
Gale.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On our risk insurance, is it somewhere at high or something? Is it in the, maybe we have a lot of hazardous jobs or what have you,
That is the industry.
and that is the driver of the retirements on compensation, what have you.
Okay.
What would be your solution if you're seeing excessive, the change in workplace, or what?
Are we talking workers' comp or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's only so much you can do to provide a safe working environment, and being a firefighter, there's a lot that you can't control because you're out in the field. You're not maybe a little easier to control if you were in a shop or something like that where you could oversee. But that's that can pose a challenge. You just hopefully you get good people that work for you, and they're just trying to get their job done. And if they get injured, they want to get better and do get better, and want to come back to the job. So that's
because some time ago the Bee had an article, and maybe they didn't really know what the work environment include, and how to make headlines on things and not look at the facts.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, we had a motion and a second.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the
Thank you.
presentation. Appreciate it. Moving on to fiscal year 2018-19 preliminary budget, CFO Thomas. And I believe Chief Harms, was this the time you wanted to say something before we move forward? I was told the stage hook was coming if I kept talking, so.
No, we have the preliminary budget for you for 18-19. I just want to comment on Amanda and the staff and the work that was put in to get to this location or at this time. It is pretty much a balanced budget starting off of the year. We went through a number of items that had raised our costs that were in there, and then also managed our expenses. So I just wanted to comment here in the beginning of how much work that the team put into it to get to where we are today for moving forward.
Very much. Ms. Thomas.
Good evening, directors, Chief Harms. Amanda Thomas, Chief Financial Officer for the district. And just to follow on to what Chief Harms was saying, obviously it's a very involved process to get to where we are today that really requires the input of all budget officers, touching all divisions of the district, and really couldn't be done without those folks. So I want to thank everyone who's been involved and was able to get us to the point where we are tonight. So I will be presenting our recommended preliminary budget for the fiscal year 2018-19. In terms of a little bit more background, the preliminary budget was presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on May 24th, and there really have been only very minor changes since then, including the adjustment to some of the position allocations in the position authorization document that was approved on the consent agenda tonight. So that is already reflected in the budget that will be presented. So just to jump right into it, this is the chart that we typically look at. It kind of shows the revenue history in the district's general fund. Looking at this chart over the last several years, you can see that we've had consistent increases in total revenues since 2010-11, and consistent year-over-year increases in property tax revenues since 2012-13. We are projecting another year of increase in property tax revenues for 18-19, so we're projecting a total property tax revenues of $146 million, which represents about a 5% increase over the current year amount. That projection is based on estimates from our property tax consultant, and you may see that revised as we get more information throughout the year and move on to final budget and mid-year budget. Looking at total revenues and other financing sources, which includes our IGT transfer, we have a total of $208 million for fiscal year 18-19. So looking at all of the budgeted funds, and I apologize that it's a little bit difficult to read all of these numbers, but this is showing you all of the funds for which we're recommending a budget. Obviously, we're going to focus mostly on the general fund, which is that first column there, and revenues excluding that IGT transfer, we're projecting at $202 million. Expenses rounding up to about $204 million. And then we have transfers out of the general fund to both the Capital Facilities Fund and the Leased Properties Fund of about $5 million in total. And then that transfer that's coming in from the IGT fund of about $6 million. So that overall, when you look at the money coming in and the money going out, we are essentially balanced. We have a very small surplus that's showing up there, but our revenues and other financing sources essentially equal to our expenditures and other financing uses. The other thing that I wanted to point out on this chart, just because I won't be talking about it again in the presentation, is that there is a rather large number you'll see there in the second column, which is called Pension Obligation Bond Fund. And that's because, in accordance with the district's pension bond policy, we will be paying off the 2004C pension obligation bonds this year from amounts that have been deposited in the Pension Bond Stabilization Fund. So that's a $25.5 million payoff that will happen towards the end of this calendar year. So looking a little bit more closely at the general fund and some of the year-over-year changes, I mentioned earlier general fund revenues $202 million. That's about a $7.6 million increase compared to the current year. Looking at the expenditures, labor costs of $174 million. That's about a $6 million increase over the current year. And total expenditures, $204 million, again, about a $6 million increase year over year. Looking at the net of the transfer activity, so that's the money going out, netted with the money coming in, we have a net of about $1.4 million coming into the general fund, which is very close to the current year number. And then again, that bottom line, we're essentially balanced this year versus a budgeted almost $1 million deficit in 17-18. So that's an improvement of about $1 million in the bottom line year to year. Looking at the general fund revenue, so property taxes, as you know, make up a majority of general fund revenue. As I mentioned, we have a budget of $146 million. That's about 70% of total revenue and other financing sources. Intergovernmental is another 2.2%, and that's really property tax related revenue. It's money that flows through the redevelopment agencies and the homeowners property tax exemption, those sorts of things. And then our next largest category of revenues after taxes is charges for services. That includes medic cost recovery, other charges for services. That's about $51 million, about 24% of general fund revenues. And then we have the operating transfer in. That is the IGT transfer coming in of about $6 million or 3%. And then finally, a little less than $1 million of other revenue sources. So as I mentioned, projected general fund revenues are $202 million overall. That's an $8 million increase compared to the 17-18 mid-year budget. Property tax revenues account for the majority of that increase, so we're looking at a $7 million increase in property tax revenues. We're also projecting a $2 million increase in medic cost recovery revenues, and that's really due to rate increases that have been enacted to ensure cost recovery. And then we have a $1 million decrease in our GEMT revenue, which was due to one-time amounts that were received this year in 17-18. So we're going back to the normal annual amount in 18-19. In addition, that net IGT revenue is transferred to the general fund, so $6 million gets added to the $202 million for total revenues and financing sources of $208 million. So turning to look at expenditures. Our largest expenditure category in the general fund is labor costs. So it's about $174 million or 83% of budgeted expenditures and financing uses. The next largest category, services and supplies, a little under $27 million. It's hard to read those numbers. About 13%. And then we have taxes, licenses, debt service, and other of $3 million or 2%. And then finally, the operating transfer out. So that's money that's going out mostly to the Capital Facilities Fund, but also to the Leased Properties Fund of about $4.8 million or 2% of overall financing uses. Looking at the labor budget, I mentioned it's $174 million, which is a $6 million increase compared to the current mid-year budget for 2017-18. Some of the changes for 18-19 relative to 17-18 include a scheduled 2.2% wage increase effective July 1st, so the beginning of this coming fiscal year. We also have increases in pension and OPEB costs, mostly related to unfunded liabilities. And then the expiration of the SAFER grant, which is funding 9 firefighter positions. We only have 2 months of that funding in 18-19 compared to 12 months in 17-18. So that's requiring additional labor costs to be funded in the general fund as opposed to the grants fund. And then as a preliminary budget assumption, we always assume that all of our positions are filled. So we have the filling of all of the positions, and that's offset basically by reduced overtime relative to the mid-year budget. So those two things basically offset each other. One thing that I will mention here is that unlike prior years, where in preliminary and final budget we didn't account for the overtime costs or the revenues associated with deployments. What we've done, the approach we've taken this year, is that we've said both the revenues and expenses would be the same as they are in 17-18. So it's not causing any change. We're just budgeting for flat expenses and revenues 17-18 to 18-19. We know that that number will adjust as we move through the year and we see what that activity actually is, but it's not resulting in any difference between the 17-18 budget and the 18-19 budget at this point. Looking at our services and supplies budget, we have a total budget of $27 million, which is about a $400,000 increase compared to the current year. Some of the larger increases are for dispatch, safety clothing and supplies, training, and also implementation of a new ERP system, and that's Enterprise Resource Planning System. And then those increases are partially offset by reductions in fire equipment supply and vehicle maintenance services due to some one-time expenditures that we had in 17-18. Looking at the final expenditure category, debt service assessments and contributions, the total budget there is $3 million. Most of that, $1.8 million, is the assessment that gets paid to the county for property tax administration. And then we also budget for general fund debt service in this category. So those payments total about $800,000, made up of lease revenue bonds, radio financing, and then IT equipment financing. And then the transfers in the general fund, we have a net transfer coming into the general fund of $1 million. And that's the $5 million that's going out to the Capital Facilities Fund and Lease Properties Fund, which is about a $400,000 increase compared to the current year, offset by the $6 million that's coming in from the IGT fund, and that's about $200,000 increase from the current year. Turning to look at the Capital Facilities Fund, we are budgeting for capital outlay, so that's the purchase of capital assets of a little over $5 million. In addition to that, we have debt service payments of a little under $5 million, and that you can see is about $1 million increase compared to the current year. That's the result of financing that happened in 17-18 and that we're planning to happen in 18-19. Those expenditures are funded with the issuance of capital leases, so that's that financing that will happen in 18-19. So we're assuming that $3.3 million of that $5.3 million in capital outlay will be financed in 18-19. We also have proceeds from the sale of property that we're assuming is a financing source of $600,000. And then we have that transfer that's coming in from the general fund. So that's sort of making up the difference there, and that's the little under $5 million. And then I did want to mention, you'll see here that we're showing basically a $1.5 million use of fund balance, and that's because in that $5 million of capital outlay, we have some items that were actually purchased in 17-18, but won't be expensed in 17-18. But the financing proceeds from those items is currently sitting in the Capital Facilities Fund. So we're basically using money that's already there to buy these items next year. So that's another funding source available. So just in summary, the net funding requirement from the general fund is $5 million. That mostly relates to paying for the debt service payments on the financing that's been done in prior years, and about $400,000 of that relates to financing that would be done in 18-19. The capital outlay for 18-19 totals $5 million, but that does include that about $1.5 million of re-budgeted purchases that were financed in 17-18. And then in addition to those amounts, the major capital purchases that will take place in 18-19 are listed here: 2 Type 1 engines for $1 million, 3 ambulances for $600,000, air rigs $600,000, and 2 Type 6 engines for $400,000. Turning to look at our grants fund. So you can see that we're showing grant revenue in 18-19 of a little under $300,000. Most of that relates to labor costs, and that is the remaining funding under the SAFER grant. You can see that there's about a $1.1 million reduction there in those costs that are funded in the grants fund. And then we have a minor amount associated with the completion of another grant. And that at this point is the totality of what is budgeted in the grants fund. But I'll just remind you that as additional grant awards are made, our practice is to take those to the board, and at that time we do an amendment to this fund to reflect those. So turning to look at the Lease Properties Fund, which is the last fund that I will talk about this evening. Rental income for the Lease Properties Fund is budgeted a little under $700,000. Total expenditures in this fund, a little over $800,000. You can see that that's about a $1.5 million reduction compared to the current year, and that's because in the current year we have the tenant improvements for the first floor of this building, so a significant one-time expenditure in the current year we're seeing go away next year. Overall, we do have about $100,000 deficit in this fund for 18-19, and that's really just the result of it being the first lease year of the first floor of this building, and we expect that to turn around in future years. So to kind of summarize where we are, We project the general fund reserves as of June 30th, 2019 to be $21 million, or 10% of net budgeted expenditures. That's essentially unchanged from where we expect to end the 17-18 year based on the current budget, because we're basically saying our revenues are going to equal our expenses, so there will be no impact to reserves. That is, of course, short of the 15% target that the board has established. Looking beyond fiscal year 18-19, as we've talked about, our future cost and revenue growth need to be aligned to ensure financial sustainability, to maintain the reserve ratio, and perhaps build upon it. And then we have identified some challenges looking out into the next 5 years, including pension costs. We're seeing the impact of that in this year's budget, and that's going to continue over the next 5-year period. We also know that there are significant capital replacement and maintenance needs. So there are some things that are not reflected in this year's budget that we know could be impacts to us. We have SCBA replacements. We're currently conducting a facilities condition assessment of all the district facilities. Expect that to identify some costs that have not yet been identified. So we know that those challenges are out there in the future. And then we also talked about the uncertainty about the future of the intergovernmental transfer program, which, as I mentioned, is providing about $6 million in terms of funding availability in the 18-19 budget. So that's something that keep an eye on developments there. With that, the recommendation is to adopt the preliminary budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. But I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that report. Any comments or questions from the board? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'm prepared to support staff recommendation. A particular question here about the SAFER grants.
Yes.
Refresh our memories as to how many positions that involves?
It's 9 firefighters.
9 firefighters. Mm-hmm. So, wow. I mean, that says a lot about what was the $6 million increase for labor costs, but we're having to support 9 additional positions. So I just want to draw attention that that's real. Those are boots on the ground, so to speak. Those are firefighters riding the engines and trucks that we're
Correct.
continuing to support.
Correct. So that essentially that funding will transfer to the general fund. There'll be general fund positions as opposed to grant funded positions going forward.
And excuse me, I want to ask now on the you said $25 million bond debt payoff. Mm-hmm. What year will that bond be paid off? Again, refresh my memory, please.
Sure. So those bonds were issued in 3 series, A, B, and C. It is the C series that will be paid off in 2018, and then the A's and the B's will be paid off in 2025.
In 25. Okay. Thank you for refreshing my memory.
Thank you very much. Anything else? And I believe, Madam Clerk, we got to take a vote on each one of these separately. Is that correct? Okay, so for action item number 3, the fiscal year 2018-19 preliminary budget, I would need a motion for A, the resolution of 18-19.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and move Resolution A, the 2018-19 preliminary budget for the General Operating Fund 212A.
Second.
Thank you. First and second, Madam Clerk.
Dr. Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item B, the Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
Mr. Chair, I'll move Resolution B, item B, resolution for the 2018-2019 preliminary budget for the Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Motion and second, Madam Clerk.
Dr. Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to C.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item number C, Resolution 2018-19 preliminary budget for the committed fund balance for the pension obligation bond 212E.
Thank you very much.
Second.
And we have a second, Madam Clerk.
Dr. Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark, Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving on to D.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item D, Resolution 2018-19 preliminary budget for the pension obligation bond fund 212E.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second, Madam Clerk.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to E.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item E, Resolution 2018-19, preliminary budget for the Grants Fund 212G.
Thank you very much.
Second.
First and second, Madam Clerk.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to F.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item F, Resolution 2018-19, preliminary budget for the Development Impact Fees Fund 212I.
Thank you.
Second.
First and second, Madam Clerk.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to G.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item G, Resolution 2018-19, preliminary budget for the Leased Properties Fund 212L.
Thank you very much.
Second.
First and second, Madam Clerk.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And the final one, letter H.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item H, Resolution 2018-19, preliminary budget for the IGT Fund 212M.
Second.
First and second, Madam Clerk.
Director Gale,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. I just want to take an opportunity, Ms. Thomas, you and your team, phenomenal. When I look at this budget, and I don't see a lot of red numbers. That makes me happy, I have to admit. But I truly appreciate the first-class work that you and your team do. I know it takes a village and the team behind you to do it, but I appreciate whoever's here and whoever hears us, please pass on our words to everybody. That's phenomenal work. We thank you.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, action item number 4, we were going to hold until after closed session. So we'll go on to reports. The President report, I do not have anything at this time. Moving on to the Fire Chief's report, Chief Harms.
Good evening, President Barn and directors. It's been about 3 weeks since we were last together. Probably the proudest thing for me is that the Harms family had a wedding, and now I have a future son-in-law, and everything went well. So thank you for the texts and the support that some of you had sent out during that time. First off, I'd like to congratulate. We had a BC promotional exam that just finished up. We had 5 members that were successful in that. The number 1 member is in the back over there. Kylie Keeley is here. Congratulations to him. And then we have a number of other members that are there. We've had a few retirements. Engineer Todd Staffenbill with 31 years retired. Captain Clay Eldridge, 28 years of service, retired. Logistics technician Vince Lawrence with 18 years retired, and engineer Michael Angadi with 28 years retired. So each of them will be missed, and as we've seen before, there's just a wave of people that are leaving, and I know some of you were able to come last Saturday or last Friday to the graduation of the Recruit Academy, and we have a new group with very little experience that is coming in, but what I've heard already, their first couple of shifts out there have been exciting. We have a recruitment open for firefighter paramedic right now. We also hired a health and fitness program manager. His name is Patrick Gallagher, and so he just started this the 1st of June here. We had a number of meetings that went on over the past few weeks with labor. We had a 2x2s with Citrus Heights. We had some folks attend the CSDA Legislative Day. We also had a 2x2 meeting with Rancho Cordova. Again, I think both of those meetings and the establishment back again with those meetings has been very, very productive. One of the things that happened yesterday in here was we came to you probably about 8 months ago and talked about a program with the International Association of Fire Chiefs and bringing a group of Saudi firefighters over. As expected, we blinked and about 7 months went by really quickly, and we had a graduation here yesterday. It was very well attended by the companies that were involved, representatives from the IFC, representatives from Saudi Aramco were also here, and they were just very, very appreciative of the effort and the experience that each one of them had received. In the morning, each of them had to do a capstone project and do a presentation. And I was able to look through those and talk with them. And it was very interesting to see what they had picked up on and what they were taking back and what they would try to implement when they go back. I know one of the things that was asked, though, in the very beginning is what's in it for Metro Fire? And there's somewhat of a risk that you're taking of bringing people in and training them and having them there. We talked about some leadership and we talked about some opportunities for people. But what I said at the graduation with them was that it provided organizational confidence. And what I meant by that was it took people and it took them out of what would be what I would say their comfort zone and allowed them to push themselves. Some of those things were challenges that were outside of culture, outside of what their normal role was. An opportunity for people to come in and put together training programs and apply those training programs. There was environmental things that we had to be able to be sensitive of, talk about, and be able to overcome. Situational management, and then just individual development. And it took a little bit of time to watch, but I look at the membership side of it and really saw a difference in people and the connection that they had made and saw the positive outcome on that program. I know 522 is here. They were very supportive throughout the program, and so I just want to thank those guys for that and being here and taking that time. Coming up here real soon, next week, is Fire Camp, and it runs the week of the 18th at Station 21. Starts on Tuesday and ends on Friday. So if you get an opportunity, I believe Tuesday, Wednesday, and part of Thursday is there. The rest of the time they go to the Burn Tower in Roseville, and then they have a fun day of water on that Friday. So that is Burn Camp next week that's coming up. The last thing is you're going to get the results from a survey. Melissa will send that out to you, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it beforehand. In conjunction with kind of the culture push that we have started with mission-driven solutions, we did a survey of the membership. We did it with, we were asked by Oklahoma State University. We had about 75% of our membership participate in the survey. There's a number of categories. There's categories by rank within the organization, by age on the job in the organization. And what it really has started is kind of given us a starting point of where we're at and what is happening with leadership in the organization, how is communications happening in the organization, trust, and really giving us a roadmap for moving forward. And again, it was another program we had talked to you about next week. MCS will be here. We'll have a day that we'll sit down and meet with them. We'll go through the survey and look at what we expected and maybe some things we didn't expect, both good and bad, that is in there, and start that roadmap. With Oklahoma State University, what they have offered to us is to come back in whatever the reasonable amount of time and do the survey again and say what things are going better or what things are going worse, where has progress been made, and move forward. So far, ourselves and San Diego have been the only two fire departments that this has been offered to. And so when we talk about comparisons to other places, there really isn't anything to be able to do, but they're trying to set this up as a model for you to get an organizational snapshot where you're at today and then where you're making progress moving forward. So she'll send that out to you. There's a number of pages, so if you can't sleep, sit down and take a look at it. Actually, once I started looking at it and reading it, it was very interesting to me, so take a look at that as you go forward. That's my end of my report, unless you have some questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any comments or questions? Okay. Moving on to operations report. Deputy Chief Bridge.
Good evening, President Barnes, directors, Chief Harms, Deputy Chief Eric Bridge, operations. Yeah, it's been a few weeks since our last report out, so we're been about 8,000 calls we've run since then, and Fire season is upon us. We still sticking to the EMS calls are staying consistent. We're at about 6,800 calls since then, and transport rates are right there at 72%. With the calls over the last several weeks, we've already surpassed the number of acreage that we burned on the vegetation side since last year, just in 3 weeks. So as I was looking at that, I was finding that the grass crop is thicker and taller than it ever has been, and it's burning early in the morning, and it's burning fast, and it's burning right down to the soil real quick. So we've a lot of our members are experiencing that, and they're doing a fantastic job, and gaining a lot of experience real quick early in the fire season. Some of those fires, one of those was 52 acres. We also had one down in the south area of about 560 acres. 2 in the same day, about an hour apart, separate times. We're about 37 acres and 24 acres here in the Rancho Cordova South area. One of those was caused by a bird strike, so didn't work out well for the bird. But anyway, it was a very odd start of a grass fire we found, so we don't see that a lot. We also had one over in the city of about 156 acres, and we just got one we just finished up is about 7 acres in Rio Linda, which the crews did a fantastic job saving a house. It was just about an hour ago. So I'll also let you know we had a couple houses burning. It was just inside the city limits, but many of our crews were on that last night, and so the fire activity is high. And then unique to today's operation, and Chief Webster, I think, is with us or was with us earlier. Got to experience and be out at Mather, where we had an airplane that landed, forgot to put his landing gear down, and caught fire. Unfortunately, the crew members got out safely, and the airport operation from Airport Unit 97 from the airports did a fantastic job of extinguishing that fire, and we had a lot of support units from Metro Fire that were there as well. So that kind of concludes my report, unless you have any further questions. I'm very busy out there right now, and it's just getting started.
All right, thank you. The only thing I have, do we have an update on the firefighter?
Yes, he's going to be out for several weeks with, he had a second-degree burn to the back of his right hand, right around his knuckles, and that kind of blistered up, and that was just some materials that it was dripping from the eaves of a roof that caught him unexpectedly as they were just doing some cleanup, mop-up work around. It was well after the fire was knocked down, but unfortunate, though, that it dripped right onto his hand there and caught a part of it. So obviously hard to put those gloves back on when you got a big thick bandage, so he'll be out for a few weeks.
Thank you for the update. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I think I saw that on Channel 3. And he's doing okay.
Yeah, he's going to be just fine. It's just the nature of the dangers sometimes of the job, you know. But he's in good spirits, though.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Local 522. Vice President Trevor Jameson.
Good evening, Directors, President Barnes, Chief Harms. Always a pleasure to be here and address you. I know tonight you're going to receive a presentation in closed session over our settlement. We went ahead and we signed that today, myself and President Bailey, who's in the audience as well. I just want to tell you that through the process that the local 522 and the membership, was I think very reasonable. Was striving to a conclusion that was good for its membership and also looking at the future for Metro Fire. So I just want to reiterate that to you as you receive your presentation. Secondly, I know with budget year coming up and positions being changed and the PAD even adjusted a little bit, we have opportunities where sometimes certain divisions may lose a spot due to funding or opportunity, and we may move it to another spot in the department. But I think it's important that when we're looking at the PAD and that we realize that the membership also, as the funding comes back or the positions become available, and mainly I'm speaking about some of the CRD positions, that we make sure we fill those and we take care of all divisions. And I think it's important that we remember everybody in this organization. There's a lot of great people here and who work day in, day out, whether they be in suppression, prevention, mechanics, logistics. So it's important to remember everybody. And finally, I got to say I really have appreciated in my first 6 months getting to know the board and seeing you out there. And Gay was here yesterday for the Saudi. Jennifer, I saw you at the graduation. the two missing chairs were there at the Randy and Grant came out to the Academy presentation, which I got to say was phenomenal. It was great to see what our Academy put on, and some officials from Citrus Heights were there. So a lot of great things moving forward into this year, and I'm very excited, and I look forward to working with the board, the chief and his staff as we move into a negotiations year. I really have high hopes for cooperation and having a great time moving forward in this year. So I appreciate it, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Thank you. I agree with the PAD and the movements. We always got to ask, why did that position exist? And it did, and it was important. We can try and get back to it when funding is there. So thank you again for being here, as always. Ty Bailey, thank you again for being here as well. So.
Thank you.
Moving on to the committee and delegate reports. Executive committee, we did not have a meeting and do not have one planned at this point in time. Communication Center, JPA, Chief Johnson.
Good evening, President Barnes, Directors, Chief Arms, Mo Johnson, Assistant Chief, Community Risk Reduction Division. Our last meeting was on May 30th of this year, where we extended an interim Communications Center Director position. So we extended that contract for another 6 months while we put together a process by which we'll find a permanent Communications Center Director. So that process will be starting here in the next couple of days. Let's see. Our next meeting is on June 26th, and just one point of note, on May 31st, Congressman Ami Bera had an opportunity to come by the Communications Center and meet with the executive staff, sit down and talk to some of the dispatchers, and he actually put the headset on and listened to some of the 911 phone calls coming in, and he got a really, really good feel for how busy we were. I think there was a couple fires or several medical aids during that time period, and I think he was amazed at how busy they are. What the takeaway from that really was how the dispatchers multitask. They're talking on the phone, they're talking to our units to make sure they're safe, but then they're also having a conversation with the person sitting next to them. They can do that all at the same time. It's something I could never do. So kudos to them, and it's very nice to see Congressman Bera out there supporting us. In a report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I would agree with you. I have too many voices in my head. I couldn't do that myself. Exactly. They argue all the time. California Fire and Rescue, JPA, Chief Shannon.
Good evening. California Fire Rescue, JPA, has not met for quite some time. We will meet next Thursday, 4 o'clock, the 21st, across the hall in the Sask. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the Finance and Audit Committee, Director Kelly.
Yes, the Finance and Audit Committee, we are extremely tired from all the work we put into the preliminary budget. The Finance and Audit Committee will meet again Thursday, June 28th.
Okay, thank you very much. And the Policy Committee, they did not have a meeting, do not have one scheduled at this time. And we will move on to board members' questions and comments prior to going into closed session. If we can go ahead and start with Director Gale.
No comment.
Thank you very much. Going down to Director Kelly.
I wanted to thank the gentleman from USI for answering questions so well out of left field.
Director Clark.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just sort of admonish the public out there to be careful. Fire season, and just we don't want to put our personnel at risk unnecessarily. So just be careful out there with these fires.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to say, first of all, congratulations to all that have passed the BC exam that Chief Harms talked about earlier. I want to say thank you to the members of the City of Rancho Cordova for hosting us at our 2x2 earlier this month. It was a productive meeting, as always, with them. Amanda, again, to your staff, can't say enough good things about the work you guys do and all the hours you put in, so thank you again for that. Unfortunately, we had an event yesterday that kind of shows us the dangers of our work, and fortunately our firefighter is going to be okay. But that's the type of work and the response to those types of injuries are what the Burn Institute, the Firefighters Burn Institute does. And I'm going to remind everyone, you've got an excellent opportunity to have a great time and to support that Burn Institute. Next Saturday, the 23rd, Tropical Affair. Be there. I hope I can see all 9 of us up there and as many from the organization as possible. It's a great day. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Sheets.
I just wanted to say congratulations to the promotions, Mr. Keeley. I was privileged to be able to go to the promotion ceremony last week. Good luck and Godspeed to the retirees. I'm excited that our youngest daughter gets to attend the fire camp next week. She's been waiting for 2 years since her older sisters went together 2 years ago, so I've heard nothing about it, nothing but when do I get to go? So she's excited. I'm excited to attend the Tropical Affair and wish speedy recovery for the firefighter that was injured yesterday. And I will be recusing myself from item number 3 in the closed session.
Thank you very much. Going last is never any fun because all the good things were already said. But when we talk about the retirees, I believe, and do not confirm my math on this, Ms. Thomas, 105 years went out the door of experience when you think about that. And that's historical knowledge of the agency, the transition, what we've gone and moving forward. We look forward to the new people coming in, wish them luck. The dangers, as was already touched on the firefighter, we wish them well, quick, speedy recovery. Tropical Affair, I will be there. And again, I'd like to echo that challenge. We'd love everybody to be there. We took a group picture last year, and I'd like to do another one again this year. Most importantly, this weekend for me, and we talk about families, it is Father's Day this weekend, and hopefully the ones that have to work get a chance to spend time with their loved ones and are spoiled rotten for all the hard work that they do, pulling double duty on the job and off the job. So with that, no, you passed. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, we're going to move on one more time. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. President. Full support of all the positive comments my fellow directors have made. I have a belated shout out to Chief Shannon and Shea Purcell Facilities for a thank you for hours of work that they did on examining a potential grant for our fleet operations. It did not come to fruition at this time because the grant expanse of the grant application was narrowed, and so it would not be appropriate for Metro to participate at this time. However, we're set for the future, and again, a belated shout out to the hours of work. These are things that a lot of us don't see or even hear about, but staff and almost all of our members are always looking into new opportunities. And so I appreciate the hours and the time spent to look into that potential opportunity.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. With that, we're going to adjourn the open session and move into closed session. And hopefully you all have a great night.
Let's see. I can report out on all three closed session items, and then you guys can take the vote on item number 2.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start open session again if you would like to report out, Councilor Lauber.
Thank you, President Barnes. Yes, the board met in closed session to consider the workers' compensation claim of Frank Miranda. This is closed session item number 1. The board voted unanimously to give authority to its third-party administrator to effectuate settlement of this workers' compensation claim. Number 2, the board met in closed session to consider the disability retirement issues and applications for employee Ron Phillips. The court will take no action was taken, and the board will take that up in open session. Concerning item number 3, the board met in closed session for conference with legal counsel regarding the case of Tracy Valentine versus Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. The board decided to give authority to its attorney in this case, which is currently pending in the federal court for the Eastern District, and authority to its management staff to take the necessary steps to effectuate settlement of the action as required by federal law and to obtain federal court approval of the settlement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll come on to now action item number 4, the industrial disability retirement. Need to have a motion on this.
Mr. Chair, I'll move we accept staff's recommendation and approve the industrial disability retirement.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Director Gale.
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Barnes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. That's going to conclude tonight's meeting. The next meeting will be right here in these chambers, June 28th at 6 p.m. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir.